Hey friends, if you've noticed I've been quiet in the past year, that's because I've been focusing on game development. I decided to do less 3D printing because I'm a bit concerned about exposure to toxic resin in my daily life, so while I'm gonna do fewer videos about 3D printing, I will do more devlog videos like this to catalog my game programming exploits. They won't be tutorials so much as simple blogs that detail parts of the development process, and indeed my thought process in making games in general. The way I see it, I can do 3D modeling, I've got a bit of programming experience, having done many Arduino projects and made Scratch games and stuff like that, and I have a fairly solid music background, so the best way to combine all these skills is in making games. Now I had been working on this MS-DOS inspired text-based game, which you see before you. It's going to be a fan sequel to the old Hugo trilogy for DOS, but I'm kind of tired of working on it, so I'm taking a break from it for now to focus on a new endeavor, which should be easier. I'll start a separate devlog series for that game though, don't you worry. So the thing I'm pivoting to is this. I think I'm gonna call it Vegan Animal Sanctuary Tycoon, which may be a mouthful, but I think every word in that title is necessary. You see, it's gonna be based off of my many experiences in volunteering for various animal sanctuaries over the past few years. I've done everything from cleaning poop to build playpens for goats, to fixing shelters after a storm, to chopping pumpkins with a machete to feed the cows, to clearing logs, all kinds of stuff. All of these sanctuaries rescue farm animals, and they're all vegan, so that's what I'm gonna call the game. And I'll have the word tycoon in there to evoke the tycoon games of old, like Roller Coaster Tycoon or Transport Tycoon. It's going to be a bit of a cozy game since nothing can go seriously wrong, but also a bit of an idle game since you'll be purchasing upgrades to passively generate more income. To make the games, I'm primarily using Blender to make artwork, which fans of my channel are probably already aware of. And for the engine, I'm using Godot, which is a free and open source engine that's currently dancing circles around Unity, and I highly recommend using it. I call it Godot
So I won't discuss so much about State of Godot this time.
because it's supposed to rhyme with robot, though many insist it should be pronounced Godot like the Samuel Beckett play, even though Samuel Beckett himself didn't pronounce the nebulous character's name as Godot, even though the characters in the play are French, but that's a whole nother story, and I don't want to get too deep into it. Suffice it to say, I hope you all don't mind that I'm pronouncing it as Godot. So I'm truly starting from the ground up with this game. So far I've made sprites for a cow, chicken, and pig, and have made some very simple walk and eating animations for them. Now I could add many more animation frames to these walk cycles, but I think I'm going to refrain from doing that just because I want this game to be very easy to make. I'm really hoping to have it done in a month or two, so if the animals walk a bit choppy, that's fine by me. I think it may add to the retro style charm of the game anyway. As you can see, I had to do a bit of iteration on the size and pixel density of these sprites. I started off way too small and realized I should probably give myself some more pixels to work with, so I arrived at this size. The cow is about 80 by 50 pixels, the chicken is about 50 by 50, the pig is somewhere in between. I went through the same thing with the landscape here. At first I made the middle area too large and the pens were too small, and there were so few pixels that the game looked a bit too blocky. So I took the same plane I created here, subdivided the pixels, and redrew everything to give myself a bit more pixel density to work with. Now you can fit more animals in each enclosure without them being too small. Now you may have noticed I'm using Blender to create the artwork here and not Sprite or something like that. The reasons for this are many, and I'm going to make a separate video explaining how Blender makes for a very favorable workflow in creating pixel art. I've also been using Blender to create art for my other games, and in the process of making this giant heap of messy pixels, I've developed many techniques to improve my workflow for making pixel art with Blender, so I'll be sharing those helpful tips soon. So let's work on one thing for the sake of this video. In addition to walking and eating animations, I also need to make animations for when you pet an animal. Yes, you will be able to pet the animals in this game. If you can pet the stray dog in Varrock and RuneScape, then by golly, you can pet the animals here. To create the animation frames for this, it's a bit of work, but essentially I've made some duplicate planes subdivided into pixels, so I'll unhide one of those, and I've already prepared these to have most of the pixels I need selected for each animal. For the cow, I want the head to tilt slightly and one of the legs to go up, and for the tail to move a bit when you pet him or her. So I'll simply deselect some of these pixels and select some other ones. Then I just have to use Ctrl-I to invert the pixels I want to delete and delete them. And then I recolor this new frame to match the coloring of the previous frame in the cow. This is made easier by the fact that Blender lets you see the color of other planes sharing the same space as the one you're working on in edit mode, so I simply trace over it with the circle select tool and apply materials. I could probably prepare a new plane that has the bulk of the cow pre-colored to save time for the next animation frame, and I should probably do that, but I'll truly be making very few animation frames for each animal, so sometimes something that might save you a bit of time isn't worth the time it takes to implement. Alright, going to Godot, I've added the overworld sprite, and I've set up some collision shapes around each enclosure. Let's add a sprite for a cow. So I'll add an animated sprite and create a new animation sheet, and we'll separate out the animations. The idle animation will just have this one frame of the cow standing, the walk animation will have the 2 walking frames, the eating animation will have the standing frame, and 2 bending over and chewing frames. And the pet animation will have 2 frames showing the cow enjoying some pets. Cows, by the way, usually love to be pet. This I can attest to. Let's quickly create a capsule collision shape and place it at the bottom of the cow sprite like this. This will help create some depth with the sprite, since if we made the capsule encompass the whole sprite like this, then the top of the cow wouldn't be stopped by the bottom of the fence like this. Kind of like how in Pokemon, how Ash always walks around the roofs of buildings relative to the camera's perspective, which doesn't really make sense in the real world. Suffice it to say, if we make the capsule just cover the bottom of the sprite, then the cow can go all the way up against the fence like this. And real quick, I made a short script for the cow so far that uses random numbers to make the cow walk in different directions. I have a number array that's 1 through 8, so we're simply saying if it's 1, stay idle and wait a random number of seconds. If it's 2, walk to the left a random number of paces and then stay idle. And if 3, walk to the right. If 4, walk southeast, and so on. This sort of randomizes the cow's movement and makes him look a little more alive. So now we'll drag this cow node into the enclosure and start the scene, and there we go, he's moving around. Next I'll have to implement the other animals in the same way, and though I added the animations for eating and being pet, I can't do anything with those until I create and implement a sprite for the sanctuary owner, who will be going around performing the actions which merit those reactions, like feeding and petting the animals, filling the water, cleaning up feces, that sort of thing. Okay, so we implemented one thing. Now it's time to look at my plans for this game. I started this Excalibur board that shows my thought process. We'll start off with a screen where you pick a starter. And this won't be explained to the player at first, but large animals like cows will consume more food and water and leave more waste, but net more prestige points, which is the game's primary currency. Chickens consume and waste less, but produce fewer prestige points, and pigs are in between. All have their merits and drawbacks. But with this screen, I want to reinforce that the focus is on the 3 most disaffected and abused farm animals, because ultimately this game is here to help elevate those animals, which is something I'm interested in as a vegan activist. I will also be asking for donations on the itch page for this game, and all proceeds will go to one of the animal sanctuaries I volunteer at. They don't know about this yet, so if I end up getting a lot of donations, it will be a very nice surprise for them. So moving on, once you start the game, it might be a bit slow at first, but you'll start off feeding, watering, and picking up after your first animal, which brings us to the core mechanic of the game, which is social media posts. Basically, you'll be taking pictures of your animals to post to social media. They will have a happiness score, which will be a factor of how well you care for them, and if you post pictures of happy animals, that will net you more followers on social media, which will increase your sanctuary's prestige score. A higher score means you can adopt more animals, but adopting more animals will require an exponentially higher score, which sort of reflects real life. The more animals you have to take care of, the harder it is overall. Followers will also make cash donations, which you'll need to buy food and things like treats and toys and equipment to build better enclosures and other improvements. You can also do things like organize volunteer or visitor days. Volunteers can either help with cleaning and provide food and water, saving you the work, or they can be put to task building improvements. Each animal will start off with a very simple shelter and nothing else, but if you buy lumber, you can have volunteers build better shelters to increase the animal's maximum happiness potential, or you can build something like a playpen for the goats. By contrast with visitor days, they will simply feed and pet the animals, but also make donations, greatly increasing your cash in one event. Just to highlight some of the idle game elements I'm planning here, you'll be able to use prestige points to purchase upgrades like treats for the animals, a groomer to increase a single animal's happiness slider maximum, a better camera to take higher quality pictures which will net more followers. You can rescue a Great Pyrenees dog which will keep the animals company and increase their happiness, or you can create a merch store to generate passive income, things like that. Besides that, I just have a lot of little things to implement. I want to have a name generator that gives each animal a unique name with each playthrough, like combining the prefix Mrs. with another random word like Fluffy, so you'd have an alpaca named Mrs. Fluffy. And I want to make randomized character elements on the animals themselves, like different breeds of chicken that can appear, cows with or without horns and with different spots. It's probably going to be a challenge to make sure that this game stays fun, keep everything balanced, nail all the numbers to make sure it's not too easy or too hard to get to the point where you've gotten all the upgrades and have rescued as many animals as possible. But thanks for joining me on this journey so far, and stay tuned for a video tutorial on using Blender to create pixel art. That should be my next video. And have a minty fresh day.